This is happening more and more because we're conditioning our young people to say, hey, this is okay, you can make these decisions. I have to say, wait a second, you guys are kids.
On the latest episode of Middle Ground, they had gay conservatives debating gay liberals, and one of the members, named Mario, revealed that he passed legislation in Nebraska that prevented young children from getting gender-affirming care. Check out what he had to say here.
I passed one of those laws in Nebraska that protects children under the age of 18 from receiving gender-affirming care and hormones. Because I've seen.
And you're proud of that.
Yes, I am very proud of that.
I am so ashamed of you.
Because I have friends who had their first experience with affirming care.
Can I finish?
But can I finish?
We're sitting here
but
with
can I finish?
the stuff you felt as a child.
I'm sure a lot of us disagree with him, but let him finish because we both have things to say.
We can all talk, but like let's let.
Because when I passed this legislation that you say targets LGBT people, I sat next to a young girl who her first experience with this type of care was a double mastectomy at 15. She's now 19, doesn't know if she'll be able to. It's actually very common. Because
how common? I want a number. How common?
Can I finish?
How common?
Can I finish?
You passed
You're
the law.
asking me a question in the middle of my statement.
You passed a law that affects so many kids from feeling like themselves.
Yes, I did.
Transgender
I'm proud
kids.
of my law.
That's unfortunate, and I'm ashamed of you.
If that's what it's going to take to get you to stop so I can finish my thought, I appreciate that.
All right, you know what? I'm going to shut up until you finish, but I would really like to say something when you're done.
Sure. The person that I testified with, who their experience was a double mastectomy.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
Are you
Let him finish.
step in? Like,
let him finish. Let him finish.
People talk.
Okay, that one person was one person in Nebraska, but I know a plethora of other people.
Hold on, let him finish.
I know a plethora of other people in other states all over this country.
Are so easy. I know a plethora of people all over the country.
Can we not do this? Like, what is the? Can we let them talk? You're gonna get time to talk.
I don't appreciate that.
I know, I'm furious too, but let him finish.
He's pissed off more than you, and he's quiet. Just let him. You're gonna get your point out. Just let him talk.
I'm good. Thank you.
Just let him talk.
Okay, let's pause.
You say how many people? You say it's a small subset. But for the people who it affects them for the rest of their lives. A decision they made as a child will affect them for the rest of their lives. This person will never feel their sensation on their chest. They don't know if they're going to ever be able to have a child, and they know they will never be able to breastfeed. They will never be a woman in the regular senses. And this is happening more and more because we're conditioning our young people to say, hey, this is okay, you can make these decisions. I have to say, wait a second, you guys are kids. Wait till you have your whole lives. Let's talk about this.
Honestly, shame on you for not going after the actual facts. I realize your anecdotal experiences move you, and I respect and appreciate that. But let's be perfectly clear. The most permanent thing a kid can go through is puberty. First of all. So when you deny a kid the opportunity to pause puberty, we're just talking about puberty blockers.
Which straight kids do all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Yes, since the 80s, kids have been prescribed puberty blockers for a variety of reasons. And the law you passed prevents that. So you steal from kids who would like to be able to pause the ability to further. Fewer than 3% of people who do any kind of transition regret it and go back. Fewer than 3%.
I like how these same guys were just talking about intersex and how even though it's a small minority, they shouldn't be ignored.
Some people are born intersex, so they have sexual organs of both genders.
It's such a rare case. I'm not saying they don't exist.
It does exist. Fewer than 3% of people who do any kind of transition regret it and go back.
It does exist. The numbers that they brought up only share a small picture. It is true that if you ask someone who's already transitioned if they regret it or not, most of them say they don't. But that's not surprising. If you've done something permanent to yourself, you have to live with it. And what's more alarming about children transitioning isn't the number that say they regret it, it's the high suicide rates and the poor mental health. A child isn't going to go to someone and say, they wish they never transitioned, make sure you put me in the survey. They're going to go to someone and say they don't know who they are, they're confused, and now they can't find a partner. Jazz Jennings never went to her mom and said, I regret transitioning. She said she was confused and didn't know who she was. And that's someone that regrets transitioning but would never say it. But they're completely ignoring the children that wanted to transition but weren't allowed to. 60 to 90% of children that wanted to transition are glad that they didn't when they turned 18. So that means children are often going through a phase of wanting to transition. When they become an adult, they no longer want to. Could you imagine if all those children were pushed into transitioning and doing something permanent with their bodies when the moment they turned 18, they didn't want to anymore?
There has been really robust standards of care laid out by all the leading medical associations that has been in existence for a long time, that is science-based, about guidelines for these things. But to be clear, the guidelines are very specific about this is supposed to be the parent's decision with their kid, with their medical provider. What you did was rob all those families of choices. Your opinion, because you believe you know better than science, you know better than parents, you know better than people who even do know themselves, you're going to prevent them from having options because you personally have a problem with something that a couple of people and some other people you're aware of knew.
It sounds
None
like
of them are
something within
statistically
himself.
significant. Maybe you've got dozens of people you know of, hundreds. That's a teeny tiny little sliver. You will never know or know of all of these people, and yet you've decided for them, and shame on you for it.
Oh, so now you want to bring up science. None of this has ever been about science. It hasn't even been about real life. It's about feelings, perceptions, identities. None of this has ever been science-based. So get out of here with that nonsense. If a child is too young to make permanent, life-altering decisions, then the parent's participation is irrelevant. In fact, if a parent agrees to go along with their young child's transition, then they're a bad parent. It's no different than when a child asks for a beer or a cigarette. If you give it to them, you're a bad parent and you're breaking the law. So all this nonsense about, well, if the parent agrees, no, it's not true. If a parent agrees to let her kid drive a car, can the kid drive the car? No. Also, just because you present your points like you're an intelligent person does not mean that what you're saying makes any sense.
I think we all can agree, though, that even though he's passed legislation, over 18, you don't care what they do.
I don't care what they do.
You're just more so protecting the kids.
He's protecting
that
kids he
are
doesn't
going
have.
His laws more so protecting those kids that are just tomboys, tomgirls, that are just they're being force-fed this idea like, oh, I'm gay, maybe I'm a girl, and then like they're just like pink. They like are more feminine and it's like, oh, actually transition.
All I'm saying is that your guys are not making space for the people who have gone through this process and regret it. I personally know someone in the same situation that you were in, and I'm not sitting here arguing for either side because I think this is a very nuanced discussion. It used to be a 2-year process. Now it's 6 months. Those things are changing because the capital and the motive behind it is now, which I'm sure that you guys on this side are against capitalistic, healthcare. That's pushing it. And those guidelines, yes.
Yes.
There's a lot of money to be made in gender-affirming
care.
care.
A lot of money to the doctor.
Motherfucker has all the facts, all the science and the data, but the moment someone says, did you know that doctors make money on this? He had no clue.
1.6 million per child that gets on it. That's throughout their lifetime. That's how much that
There
farmer
are
makes
so many
from
other
it.
things that kids get that make people more money.
I understand that, but you're not leaving any room for nuance in this discussion.
Actually, I would argue that you guys aren't leaving room for nuance because you make a decision.
I never said a statement.
Well, okay,
on it.
nuance
think it's a
is
lie.
valuable, and that's why we leave it up to the parents and the medical professionals and the individuals who are making these decisions. There are people who get hair plugs and regret it. There are people who get nose jobs and regret it. There is no such thing.
we don't
There's
give
no,
hair
I'm not-
plugs and
there is
nose
no-
jobs to kids.
there-
But
no,
kids can get
the
nose
point is-
jobs,
okay,
can get
pause.
breast jobs. Of course, kids are getting this all the time.
He still wants to leave it to the medical professionals, even though he just found out that they make $1.6 million per child transition. And he still wants to leave it to the parents, even though parents can be terrible and support bad decisions. And stop comparing it to nose jobs. Nose jobs don't make you unable to have kids. This is much more comparable to having a child because it's irreversible and something that changes your life forever. If your 14-year-old came up to you and said they wanted a child, you wouldn't let them do that because they're too young. But for some reason, we're okay with letting kids change their gender and completely mutilate their genitals, making them unable to have children, a family of their own, which makes it much harder for them to find a partner. And all of this has a negative impact on their mental health and explains why the suicide rates are so high.